Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. President Lee Jae-myung returned home last night after wrapping up his 4-day state visit to China. He said he asked President Xi to play a mediating role on issues related to the Korean Peninsula and North Korea's nuclear program, and explained working-level talks on Beijing's steel structures in the West Sea will begin soon. Samsung posted a record-breaking operating profit of more than 20 trillion Korean won, or about $13.8 billion in the fourth quarter of last year. This marks the first time a South Korean company has reported an operating profit exceeding 20 trillion won in a single quarter. The world's largest tech show, CES, is underway in Las Vegas. And this year, South Korea ranks third in terms of the number of participating companies. This includes not just global industry leaders, but also startups looking to establish their presence on the global stage. President Lee Jae-myung has returned home after wrapping up his 4-day state visit to China. He held a press briefing this afternoon with the Presidential Press Corps on the last day. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin starts us off.
A trip with even more progress than anticipated. That's how President Lee Jae-myung described his 4-day state visit to China during a surprise press conference on Wednesday.
교감도 많이 이루어졌던 것 같고 또 예를 들면 대립할 수 있는 사안들에 대해서도 아주 원만하게 해소할 수 있는 길을 찾아냈던 것 같습니다.
High on the agenda was North Korea. President Lee said peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula were among the key issues discussed in depth with President Xi Jinping.
그래서 우리는 노력하지만 지금 현재는 완전히 차단된 상태라서 소통 자체가 안 되니까 중국이 중재자 역할을 평화의 중재자 역할을 좀 해주면 좋겠다 이렇게 얘기했습니다.
President Xi responded that Beijing would make efforts in that direction, but stressed the need for patience, given how hostile inter-Korean relations have become in recent years. For a nuclear-free Korean peninsula, Lee mentioned he asked China to help convey his message that a more realistic approach would be to first stop Pyongyang's nuclear program development in exchange for corresponding measures. When asked whether he sees signs of improvement in China's unofficial restrictions on Korean cultural content, including K-dramas and K-pop, the president answered that there was a clear expression of intent.
석자 얼음이 한꺼번에 언 것도 아닌데 또 한꺼번에 다 녹겠냐. 또 과일은 때가 되면 익어서 떨어진다. 이렇게 직접 시 주석께서 말씀하셨는데 그게 정확한 표현인 것 같습니다.
He added that he emphasized the importance of easing such restrictions to address growing anti-China sentiment in South Korea. Regarding China's installation of large structures, including aquaculture facilities, in Seoul and Beijing's jointly managed maritime area in the West Sea, working-level talks will begin to clarify where the boundary is in the shared zone. President Lee says he and President Xi have agreed to meet in person at least once a year. With China set to host the 2026 APEC leaders meeting in Shenzhen, attention is now turning to whether the two leaders will hold another bilateral meeting this year. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Shanghai.
And before returning to Seoul, President Lee also visited the provisional government building on Wednesday to mark its centennial anniversary. He noted that Korea's history of fighting for independence serves as the foundation of its friendly cooperation with China. He also vowed to put in efforts to repatriate the remains of independence patriots yet to return home. The Korean leader also thanked China for protecting the provisional government building, which was restored in 1993. The building in Shanghai is one of several headquarters used by the Korean government in exile during Japanese colonial rule. South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics posted an earnings surprise for the fourth quarter of 2025, marking the highest quarterly performance in the company's history. According to its preliminary quarterly earnings released on Thursday, earnings have surpassed market forecasts, with a record-breaking operating profit of over 20 trillion Korean won, or $13.8 billion US dollars. Now, this is up more than 208% from the same period a year earlier. It's also the first time a South Korean company has posted an operating profit exceeding 20 trillion Korean won in a single quarter. Revenue also saw a record high, reaching 93 trillion won, or $65.3 billion US dollars. So with the two largest Korean companies by market cap, Samsung Electronics and SK hynix shares hitting record highs, the country's benchmark KOSPI index surged past 4,500 points this week. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Shin Se-don, professor at the Division of Business Economics at Sookmyung Women's University. Professor Shin, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So the KOSPI at 5,000 points was something President Lee Jae-myung had promised to achieve during his presidential campaign, and some analysts say this could actually be achieved much sooner than expected, possibly as early as this month, especially with Samsung posting record profits this morning. What's your take on this and Samsung's latest announcement?
One word, I should say amazing. KOSPI has been around 2,000 for more than a decade, from 2010 to 2020, and everybody believed that KOSPI cannot go over 3,000, but now it's almost 4,600 today, and it's about less than 10% away from 5,000. So I don't know if it could go up to 5,000 this month, but it is pretty sure that we're going to get to 5,000 throughout within 2026. The point is whether 5,000 KOSPI could stay and go up above 5,000. That I think is the most crucial thing, and that depends upon many other things. But mostly, I think record-breaking level of achievements by Samsung and hynix that could contribute to making KOSPI 5,000. And also, Korea have to have a solid economic growth and sound export performances. So we have to see whether the KOSPI could maintain 5,000 throughout 2026.
I see. And more broadly, gold prices are inching closer to a record peak, especially amid global uncertainties following the arrest of Venezuela's president. What's your outlook for gold prices throughout this year? And are there any broader economic impacts that the Venezuela situation could have on the global economy?
Well, on gold price, if you look at the data, the price of gold has been rising from early 2024, and 2024 is the time when people are thinking about global inflation and possibly the U.S. rate hike. So as long as global inflation lingers on, I think the gold price will go up from 4,400 right now, possibly to 4,500 and even to 5,000 within this year. And that's for sure. So gold price will go up as long as there is inflation. On Venezuela situation, we are pretty surprised that global, oil market, global stock market has not been pretty much affected by Venezuelan kind of abduction by U.S. president. The problem is, new problem is emerging right now. That is the issue of Greenland, which United States is interested in annexing the Greenland. And so in the future, I think the global problem is around the Greenland problem rather than Venezuelan problem. So on the Venezuelan situation, I think it would not have a significant economic or financial impact upon the global markets.
I see. And the government has been making efforts to tackle the weakening Korean won, and South Korea's foreign exchange reserves actually fell sharply in December, and this actually marked the largest monthly decline since the country's foreign exchange crisis in 1997. Is this something to be concerned about? And would you say the exchange rate situation is now under control, or will the rate keep rising throughout this year.
Yeah, it was really true that, month of, I think, December, the amount of decline in the Korean Bank of Korea reserve down by about a little less than $3 billion. And that is the biggest, monthly change for the last 40 years. So it is pretty shocking that the greatest amount of reserve has been declined within a month. But the amount of $3 billion is less than 1% of BOK external reserve, which is about $400 billion. So that is the record level of decline in the foreign reserve, but the actual amount is less than 1%. So it's not pretty much significant. Future course of Korean won depends upon United States, the interest rate and the Bank of Korea rate. And of course, it depends upon the Bank of Japan rate, which is expected to be raised from 0.75 to possibly 1.0% or possibly 1.25 within 2026. So I think we have to look at, the key movements in the interest rates. But I think that Bank of Japan will raise the rate at least 50 basis points to 2026. And then the yen would appreciate. And if yen appreciate, I think Korean currency will go down throughout 2026. So I'm expecting that the exchange rate, Korean won, would go down from 1,440 right now, possibly to 1,400 or even lower than 1,400 down the road.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. And speaking of interest rates, next week, the Korean authorities will hold their first rate policy meeting of the year. Do you expect them to decide on a rate cut? No. Bank of Korea has no room to maneuver the rate to lower from 2.5% because first, Korean rate 2.5% is a lot lower than United States, which has been pretty rare thing because always Korean rate has been higher than United States. So Bank of Korea has no room to lower the rate because of current situation of exchange rate on the one hand and potential rise in the housing prices. So I think there's no chance, no probability of the Bank of Korea to lower the rate this time, and even throughout 2026. Bank of Korea has very little room to, maneuver the rate to 2.5 or lower than that. I think possibly the Bank of Korea would have raised the rate from 2.5% to possibly 2.75 or even 3% if exchange rate, keep rising from 1,440 at the moment. I see. I guess we'll have to see how that plays out next week. All right, Professor Shin, thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
The world's biggest tech show, CES 2026, is underway in Las Vegas. South Korea has once again made its mark with the third largest group of companies attending the event. For more, let's turn to our Kim Do-yeon, who is on the line from Las Vegas. Do-yeon, set the scene for us.
That's right, Angie. For today, I'm here at the Venetian Expo, one of the main exhibition halls for CES, and which has on the first floor what's called the Eureka Park, where the startups are located. Now, as we've mentioned, South Korea has the third most companies at CES this year. And among them are, of course, your global leaders in the industries like Hyundai and Samsung. But many of them are up-and-coming companies trying to get their presence out there in the global stage. Now, leading them is KOTRA, the Korea Trade Investment and Promotion Agency, and earlier today the agency explained what this means to the companies.
It is a very important exhibition for us. It is the one we put the most effort into, and if we support them well, good results can follow.
Through the agency and 38 other institutions, a total of 470 companies have formed the largest ever Integrated Korea Pavilion. This is the highest number of participants, and you can see they're all showing their own slogan of K-Innovators Show Up, which is just adding a K to the main slogan of this year's CES. Institutions that back these smaller companies include provincial governments like Seoul City as well as universities. But we do have to keep in mind that even if they're backed by these institutions, companies are carefully selected by the CES organizer, CTA, in order to get a spot here.
I see. And Toyan, I hear they also had the chance to pitch their businesses live. What was that about?
That is right. In the middle of Eureka Park's Kotra exhibition, there is a large stage set up right in the middle. They're presenting to global giants like Walmart, Intel, and Sam's Club, hoping to secure partnerships and investments. Now, first, take a listen to the confidence of one of the pitching entrepreneurs at the stage.
Alpaca X is growing fast and customers love it and they are paying actually. And we have powerful customers and partners like this.
Now this pitching event will run until tomorrow with more than a dozen companies participating. This program is just one of many events that Kotra is holding to boost the exposure of Korean companies here at CES 2026. Back to you, Unji.
All right, Toyan, thank you for that report. Washington says it's moving to assert control over Venezuela's oil sector after the removal of Nicolas Maduro. This comes as the U.S. officials on Wednesday confirmed the seizure of 2 oil tankers linked to Venezuelan petroleum exports. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The Trump administration says it's moving to assert control over Venezuela's oil sector following the removal of former President Nicolas Maduro in a U.S. military operation earlier this month. On Wednesday, U.S. officials confirmed the seizure of 2 oil tankers linked to Venezuelan petroleum exports. One vessel, sailing under a Russian flag, was boarded in the North Atlantic after nearly 2 weeks of pursuit as it traveled between Iceland and Scotland. A second tanker was boarded in the Caribbean, with U.S. authorities accusing it of conducting illicit oil transport activities. U.S. officials say the seizures are part of a broader effort to enforce sanctions and prevent unauthorized exports of Venezuelan crude. At the same time, the administration announced plans to relax certain sanctions in order to place Venezuelan oil sales under U.S. oversight. With this, however, the U.S. Energy Department says that going forward, oil transported in and out of Venezuela will only be allowed through channels approved by Washington and consistent with U.S. law and national security policy. While an existing oil embargo remains in place, the administration says it intends to manage how Venezuelan oil is sold on global markets. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said oil seized from the 2 tankers could be included in an agreement announced earlier this week, under which Venezuela would provide up to 50 million barrels of oil to the U.S. The oil would then be sold under U.S. supervision. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt said the rollback of some sanctions is intended to give Washington greater control of Venezuelan oil revenues following Maduro's removal.
So the U.S. is selectively rolling back sanctions to enable the transport and the sale of Venezuelan crude and oil products to the global markets.
She stressed that the U.S. control of the Venezuelan oil will prevent funds from being diverted through illicit networks. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The United States' surprise military operation in Venezuela last week continues to fuel reaction from around the world. And for North Korea, the developments are likely to push the regime to enhance its nuclear capabilities. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
America's capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro may embolden North Korea's nuclear resolve rather than trigger fear or subjugation. According to Chung Song-jang, a leading North Korea expert at the Seoul-based Haejong Institute, North Korea's response sharply criticized the US, but was notably restrained in its format.
North Korea seems to have adjusted the level of its response to the U.S. As a regime fundamentally opposed to the U.S., it couldn't remain silent, but it doesn't have major interests like China in criticizing the U.S.
This may reflect a degree of confidence arising from the regime's possession of nuclear weapons.
North Korea believes it is different from Venezuela. Venezuela has no nuclear weapons and no ICBMs, so it cannot retaliate. However, North Korea believes it has a clear deterrent, and thus, the U.S. would not dare touch North Korea. So there also seems to be a certain level of confidence, and that's why Kim is resuming his day-to-day activities. From his daily photos, his security protection doesn't seem to have increased just yet.
Since Christmas Eve, Kim has overseen test launches of long-range strategic cruise missiles and additional ballistic missiles. Experts believe this will continue as part of the regime's new 5-year national plan, set to be unveiled at the upcoming 9th Congress of the ruling Workers' Party. The North's external policy is likely to criticize Holden Washington sharply and perhaps mention US intervention in Venezuela to justify Pyongyang's nuclear and conventional forces. Still, Kim may not have ruled out reviving his talks with Donald Trump, as the regime wanted to see global sanctions on it lifted. With Trump expected to visit China in April, eyes are on whether the Chinese leader Xi Jinping might invite Kim to Beijing.
North Korea is currently building hospitals across different regions, but it lacks essential medical equipment to put inside those hospitals. If China were to support North Korea with such urgently needed supplies and invite Kim to Beijing, that could naturally create an opportunity for Trump and Kim to meet.
President Lee Jae-myung this week has also agreed on the need to revive dialogue with Pyongyang during talks with his Chinese counterpart. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In the United States, an immigration and customs enforcement officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota, shot and killed a woman during an immigration crackdown in the city. Bystander videos show an ICE officer approaching an SUV and demanding the driver open the door. As the SUV starts to move forward, a second officer standing in front of the vehicle draws his gun and fires at least 2 shots at close range. Minneapolis city officials on Wednesday said the 37-year-old woman was shot in the head and later died in hospital. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said that the driver tried to run over the ICE officer in what she called an act of domestic terrorism, while Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said the shooting was reckless and unnecessary and demanded that the federal agents leave the city. Iran's army chief warned Iran could take preemptive military action over what he called escalating rhetoric after President Donald Trump said the United States would, quote, come to their rescue if Tehran violently kills peaceful protesters. Major General Amir Hatami said Iran will, quote, cut off the hand of any foreign invader and claimed the armed forces are more ready than before the June 12-day war with Israel, after which he became army commander. The warning comes as protests that began in December reached their 11th day. Iran also began paying citizens a new subsidy of 10 million lias, about $7 to households for daily goods. As the Trump administration intensifies rhetoric about U.S. control of Greenland, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Wednesday he will meet Danish officials next week to discuss the matter. Rubio confirmed the meeting after being asked about Denmark's request for talks, saying only that discussions would take place next week. He declined to comment on whether military options would be ruled out. The comments come as Donald Trump and senior aides describe Greenland as a U.S. national security priority. Meanwhile, Denmark's Defense Minister Truls Lund Poulsen said Copenhagen will spend 88 billion Danish kroner, about $13.8 billion US dollars, to reinforce Greenland's defenses, while calling for cooperation and respect between allies. Conservationists at Virunga National Park in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo say an endangered mountain gorilla gave birth to twin baby boys, a rare event for the species. Trackers found the 22-year-old mother hugging her newborns on Saturday and said all 3 appeared healthy. Twin births are thought to make up about 1% of mountain gorilla births. Officials say fewer than 1,100 mountain gorillas remain in the wild, found only in Virunga and parks in Rwanda and Uganda. The parks has put additional monitoring and protection in place, noting the last twin birth there was in September 2020.
A renewed wave of bitter cold has taken hold today. Seoul began the day 9 degrees colder than yesterday with that biting winds and a cold wave advisories in place across most of the central regions, and it's going to stay freezing all day today. Cold, dry air is increasing the risk of wildfire. Dry weather alerts remain in place across the capital and eastern parts of Korea. With strong winds adding to the risk, extra caution is needed to prevent wildfires. And this afternoon, most regions will see temperatures going down 4 to 5 degrees lower than on Wednesday. Seoul, Chuncheon topping out at just -1 degree. Daejeon, Daegu at 2 degrees under mostly sunny skies, except on the west of Jeju with more rainfall. Then we'll get a brief relief from this strong cold snap tomorrow. Then freezing weather returns and stays through early next week. Meanwhile, starting tomorrow through the weekend, a wintry mix is forecast for central regions and parts of southern areas.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.